Everyone. So on behalf of my colleagues, the staff and the students in WGSI, we are honored that you can join us to collectively celebrate the gifts that writer, Black feminist, theorist, cultural critic, and now our ancestor, Professor Bell Hooks, Gloria Jean Watkins, has left us. I'm going to begin now with the land acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates, on Indigenous lands and shores of the planet's largest gathering of fresh water. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is now to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in and enter into respectful and caring relations in community on this territory. So my name is Cassandra Lord. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Historical Studies and the Women and Gender Studies program at the Mississauga campus of U of T. And I'm here also to say that in commemoration of the works of Bell Hooks that we're going to be reading today, I want to say that Hooks has authored over 40 books and 4 decades worth of writing and thinking, and has shaped our understanding of Black feminist theory and praxis. Also, Hooks has informed my own work from the time I was an undergraduate in this institute that I now teach in. And her phenomenal book, seminal book, Ain't I a Woman, has shaped my own understanding of Black women's identity and opposition to white dominance. So as we begin today, we will start with the first selection by Jade Nixon, and then I will read, and then we will continue through the process of the participants. And Beth, do you want to say something else before we begin?
I just have a brief comment, and then we're following your lead, Cassandra. Thank you for just giving us the précis on Gloria. So I just wanted to share with the group our bell hooks, my bell hooks. My first year as an undergraduate at Yale was her first year as an assistant professor, and it was a revelation, her revolutionary attitude. I'd had classrooms where people talked about Black liberation before, but not Black liberation and Black love. And Gloria really just opened it up. She loved literature. She loved us. She made us laugh. Her cute little girl voice saying the most explosive and empowering things, and provocative, not just empowering, but provocative. It was as if we could be smart and speak about the world before us in ways that really had never shown up in that kind of a room before. Once when she thought we were being lazy readers and she was a queen of rigor, she had us do an on-the-spot deconstruction of Prince's If I Were Your Girlfriend. The other side of the picture, and the reason I mentioned the university, is the rough treatment at the hands of that university. So that was also a learning for me in terms of, oh, this is what this looks like, and recognizing her incredible magnetism and power for us as students, and that her colleagues at the same space, she didn't stay. She wasn't there the whole time. This mentorship, though, this vision moved me through graduate work, where we were reunited for a graduate seminar. Hey, Carol Lynch, I see you out there, who's also part of that seminar. And Gloria and I did not always agree, but she did always transform me. So I just wanted to share that with the group. So.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for Cassandra, and thank you to Cassandra, rather. My name is Jade Nixon, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Women and Gender Studies Institute, and I'm going to read a passage from the book that titles this readathon, All About Love. So I'll begin. To begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one way in which using the word in this manner automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. We are often taught we have no control over our feelings. Yet most of us accept that we choose our actions, that intention and will inform what we do. We also accept that our actions have consequences. To think of action shaping feelings is one way we rid ourselves of conventionally accepted assumptions, such as that parents love their children, or that one simply falls in love without exercising will or choice. That there are such things as crimes of passion. In other words, he killed her because he loved her so much. If we're constantly remembering that love is as love does, we would not use the word in a manner that devalues and degrades its meaning. When we are loving, we openly and honestly express care, affection, responsibility, respect, commitment, and trust. Definitions are vital starting points for the imagination. What we cannot imagine cannot come into being. A good definition marks our starting point and lets us know where we want to end up. As we move towards our desired destination, we chart the journey, creating a map. We need a map to guide us on our journey to love, starting with the place where we know what we mean when we speak of love. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jade. I'm reading from a passage in Our Glory, Photography and Black Life from the book, Art on My Mind. Although my sisters and I look at this snapshot and we see the same man, we do not see him in the same way. Our reading and our experience of this image is shaped by our relationship with him, with the world of childhood, and the images that make our lives what they are now. I want to rescue and preserve this image of our Father, not let it be forgotten. It allows me to understand him, provides a way for me to know him that makes it possible to love him again, despite all the other images, the ones that stand in the way of love. Such is the power of the photograph, of the image, that it can give back and take away, that it can bind. The snapshot of Viardis Watkins, our father, sometimes called Ned or Leaky in his younger days, gives me a space for intimacy between the image and myself, between me and Dad. I'm captivated, seduced by it, the way other images have caught and held me, embraced me like arms that would not let go. The image in this snapshot has lingered in my mind's eyes for years. It has lingered there to remind me of the power of snapshots of the image. As I slowly complete a book of essays titled Art on My Mind, I think about the planet of art in Black life, connections between the social construction of Black identity, the impact of race and class, and the presence in Black life of the inarticulate but ever-present visual aesthetics governing our relationship to images, to the process of image making. I return to the snapshot as a starting point to consider the place of the visual in Black life, the importance of photography. Cameras gave to Black folks, irrespective of class, a means by which we could participate fully into production of images. Hence, it is essential that any theoretical discussion of the relationship of Black life to the visual, to art making, make photography central. Access and mass appeal have historically made photography a powerful location for the construction of an oppositional Black aesthetic. Before racial integration, there was this constant struggle on the part of Black folks to create a counter-hegemonic world of images that would stand as visual resistance, challenging racist images. All colonized and subjugated people who, by way of resistance, create an oppositional subculture within the framework of domination, recognize that the field of representation, how we see ourselves, how others see us, is a site of ongoing struggle. Drawing from the past, from those walls of images I grew up with, I gather snapshots and lay them down to see what narratives the images tell, what they say without words. I search these images to see if there are imprints waiting to be seen, recognized, and read. Together, a Black male friend and I lay down the snapshots of his boyhood to see when he began to lose a certain openness, to discern at what age he began to shut down, to close himself away. Through these images, my friend hopes to find a way back to the self he once was. We are awed by what our snapshots reveal, what they enable us to remember. The word remember, remember, invokes the coming together of severed parts, fragments becoming a whole. Photography has been and is central to that aspect of decolonization that calls us back to the past and offers us a way to reclaim the renewed life-affirming bonds. Using images, we connect ourselves to the recuperative, redemptive memory that enables us to construct radical identities, images of ourselves that transcend the limits of the colonizing eye.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Sharp, and I'm an associate professor at the Factwoman and Tosh Faculty of Social Work and the founder and director for the Center for Research and Innovation for Black Survivors of Homicide Victims, aka the CRIB. I just want to say before I start, it's an honor to be here today, sharing this space with you as we honor Bell Hooks, someone who has been so profoundly transformative in the way that I think, the way that I feel, and the way that I speak my truth, our truths. So thank you. I'll be reading an excerpt from Love as the Practice of Freedom. In this society, there is no powerful discourse on love, emerging either from politically progressive radicals or from the left. The absence of a sustained focus on love in progressive circles arises from a collective failure to acknowledge the needs of the spirit and an overdetermined emphasis on material concerns. Without love, our efforts to liberate ourselves and our world community from oppression and exploitation are doomed. As long as we refuse to address fully the place of love in struggles for liberation, we will not be able to create a culture of conversion where there is a mass turning away from an ethic of domination. Without an ethic of love, shaping the direction of our political vision and our radical aspirations, we are often seduced in one way or the other into continued allegiance to systems of domination, imperialism, sexism, racism, and classism. It has always puzzled me that women and men who spend a lifetime working to resist and oppose one form of domination can be systematically supporting another. I've been puzzled by powerful, visionary Black male leaders who can speak and act passionately in resistance to racial domination and accept and embrace sexist domination of women by feminist white women who work daily to eradicate sexism, but who have major blind spots when it comes to acknowledging and resisting racism and white supremacy domination of the planet. Critically examining these blind spots, I conclude that many of us are motivated to move against domination solely when we feel our self-interest directly threatened. Often then, the longing is not for a collective transformation of our society, an end to politics of dominations, but rather simply for an end to what we feel is hurting us. This is why we desperately need an ethic of love to intervene in our self-centered longing for change. Fundamentally, if we are only committed to an improvement in that politic of domination that we feel leads directly to our individual exploitation or oppression, we not only remain attached to the status quo, but act in complicity with it, nurturing and maintaining those very systems of domination. Until we are all able to accept the interlocking, independent nature of systems of domination, and recognize specific ways each system is maintained, we will continue to act in ways that undermine our individual quest for freedom and collective liberation struggle. Thank you.
Hi, I am Alex Waglia, and I'm going to be reading from an essay called "Is Paris Burning?" from Black Looks, Race, and Representation. And this is Hooks's engagement with Jenny Livingston's documentary, Paris is Burning. Paris is Burning is a film that many audiences assume is inherently oppositional because of its subject matter and the identity of the filmmaker. Yet the film's politics of race, gender, and class are played out in ways that are both progressive and reactionary. When I first heard that there was this new documentary film about Black gay men, drag queens, and drag balls, I was fascinated by the title. It evoked images of the real Paris on fire, of the death and destruction of a dominating white Western civilization and culture, an end to oppressive Eurocentrism and white supremacy. This fantasy not only gave me a sustained sense of pleasure, it stood between me and, between me and the unlikely reality that a young white filmmaker offering a progressive vision of Blackness, in quotation marks, from the standpoint of whiteness, quotation marks, would receive the positive press accorded Livingston in her film. Watching Paris is Burning, I began to think that many yuppie-looking, straight-acting, pushy, predominantly white folks in the audience were there because the film in no way interrogates whiteness. These folks left the film saying it was amazing, marvelous, incredibly funny, worthy of statements like, "Didn't you just love it?" And no, I didn't just love it. In many ways, the film was a graphic documentary portrait of the way in which colonized Black people, in this case, Black gay brothers, some of whom were drag queens, trans women, worship at the throne of whiteness, even when such worship demands that we live in perpetual self-hate, steal, lie, go hungry, and even die in its pursuit. The we, quote unquote, evoked here is all of us, Black people, people of color who are daily bombarded by a powerful colonizing whiteness that seduces us away from ourselves, that negates that there is beauty to be found in any form of Blackness, that is not an imitation of whiteness. The whiteness celebrated in Paris is Burning is not just any old brand of whiteness, but rather that brutal, imperial, ruling class, capitalist, patriarchal whiteness that presents itself, its way of life, as the only meaningful life there is. What could be more reassuring to a white public fearful that marginalized, disenfranchised Black folks might rise any day now and make revolutionary Black liberation struggle a reality than a documentary affirming that colonized, victimized, exploited Black folks are all too willing, are all too willing to be complicit in perpetuating the fantasy that ruling class white culture is the quintessential site of unrestricted joy, freedom, power, and pleasure. Indeed, it is this very pleasure that so many white viewers with class privilege experience when watching this film that has acted to censor dissenting voices who find the film and its reception critically problematic. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cornell Gray. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Dalalana School of Public Health. I'll be reading an excerpt from All About Love, New Visions.
I think you want to hear the album. I will be here.
Sure about that. Awakening to love can happen only as we let go of our obsession with power and domination. Culturally, all spheres of American life, politics, religion, the workplace, domestic households, intimate relations, should and could have as their foundation a love ethic. The underlying values of a culture and its ethics shape and inform the way we speak and act. A love ethic presupposes that everyone has the right to be free, to live fully and well. To bring a love ethic to every dimension of our lives, our society would need to embrace change. At the end of The Art of Loving, Erich Fromm affirmed that important and radical changes are necessary if love is to become a social and not a highly individualistic, marginal phenomenon. Individuals who choose to love can and do alter our lives in ways that honor the primacy of a love ethic. We do this by choosing to work with individuals we admire and respect, by committing to give our all to relationships, by embracing a global vision wherein we see our lives and our fate as intimately connected to those of everyone else on the planet. Commitment to a love ethic transforms our lives by offering us a different set of values to live by. In large and small ways, we make choices based on a belief that honesty, openness, and personal integrity need to be expressed in public and private decisions. I chose to move to a small city so I could live in the same area as family, even though it was not as culturally desirable as the place I left. Friends of mine live at home with aging parents, caring for them even though they have enough money to go elsewhere. Living by a love ethic, we learn to value loyalty and commitment to sustain bonds over material advancement. While our careers and making money remain important agendas, they never take precedence over valuing and nurturing human life and well-being. I know no one who has embraced a love ethic whose life has not become joyous and more fulfilling. The widespread assumption that ethical behavior takes the fun out of life is false. In actuality, living ethically ensures that relationships in our lives, including encounters with strangers, nurture our spiritual growth. Behaving unethically with no thought to the consequences of our actions is a bit like eating tons of junk food. While it may taste good, in the end, the body is never really adequately nourished and remains in a constant state of lack and longing. Our souls feel this lack when we act unethically, behaving in ways that diminish our spirits and dehumanize others. Thank you.
Hello. Today, you see me here. My name is Rhonda McKenzie. I am a professor of emerging technology and dean at UTM. But I want you to picture a different me, a 29-year-old engineering student at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And that's when I first read Where We Stand, Class Matters by Bell Hooks. This book located and transformed me. At times, when I wander around my neighborhood, staring at the dark-skinned nannies, hearing the accents that identify them as immigrants still, I remember this is the world a plantation economy produces. A world where some are bound and others are free. A world of extremes. Most folks in my predominantly white neighborhood see themselves as open-minded. They believe in justice and support the right causes. More often than not, they are social liberals and fiscal conservatives. They may believe in recognizing multiculturalism and celebrating diversity. Our neighborhood is full of white gay men and straight white people who have at least one Black, Asian, or Hispanic friend. But when it comes to money and class, they want to protect what they have, to perpetuate and reproduce it. They want more. The fact that they have so much while others have so little does not cause moral anguish, for they see their good fortune as a sign they are chosen, special, deserving. It enhances their feeling of prosperity and well-being to know everyone cannot live as they do. Well, they scoff at overzealous liberals who are prone to feeling guilty. Downward mobility is a thing of the past. In today's world of affluence, the message is, you got it, flaunt it. When a long-time small family business closed down because the rents are too high and yet another high-priced gift shop or hair salon opens, they may feel regret, but understand this is the price of economic progress, the price of real estate constantly zooming upward in cost. They have no memories of the days when the West Village was home of struggling artists, musicians, and poets, a sanctuary for the sexually free and transgressive, a place of rebellion. They have no memory of days when Black females could not rent a room or flat here because white folks saw us all, no matter our class, as prostitutes, as bad news. Nowadays, we can have the keys to the big house as long as we're coming to clean and do childcare. Neighbors tell me the lack of diversity has nothing to do with racism. It's just a matter of class.
Hi there. My name is Rosalind Hampton, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Social Justice Education. And like so many people here, it's been really, really good to think about those early undergraduate days where I first was introduced to bell hooks writing and presence as a scholar in the academy. I'm going to read from her essay called Choosing the Margin as a Space of Radical Openness. I had to leave that space I called home to move beyond boundaries, yet I needed also to return there. We sing a song in the Black church tradition that says, I'm going up the rough side of the mountain on my way home. Indeed, the very meaning of home changes with experience of decolonization, of radicalization. At times, home is nowhere. At times, one knows only extreme estrangement and alienation. Then home is no longer just one place. It is locations. Home is that place which enables and promotes varied and ever-changing perspectives, a place where one discovers new ways of seeing reality, frontiers of difference. One confronts and accepts dispersal and fragmentation as part of the construction of a new world order that reveals more fully where we are, who we can become, an order that does not demand forgetting. Our struggle is also a struggle of memory against forgetting. This experience of space and location is not the same for Black folks who have always been privileged, or for Black folks who desire only to move from underclass status to points of privilege. Not the same for those of us from poor backgrounds who have had to continually engage in actual political struggle, both within and outside Black communities, to assert an aesthetic and critical presence. Black folks coming from poor underclass communities who enter universities or privileged cultural settings, unwilling to surrender every vestige of who we were before we were there, all sign of our class and cultural difference, who are unwilling to play the role of exotic other, must create spaces within that culture of domination if we are to survive whole, our souls intact. Our very presence is a disruption. We are often as much an other, a threat to Black people from privileged class backgrounds who do not understand or share our perspectives, as we are to uninformed white folks. Everywhere we go, there is pressure to silence our voices, to co-opt and undermine them. Mostly, of course, we are not there. We never arrive or can't stay. Back in those spaces where we come from, we will kill ourselves in despair, drowning in nihilism, caught in poverty, in addiction, in every postmodern mode of dying that can be named. Yet when we few remain in that other space, we are often too isolated, too alone. We die there too. Those of us who live, who make it, passionately holding on to aspects of that down-home life we do not intend to lose, while simultaneously seeking new knowledge and experience, invent spaces of radical openness. Without such spaces, we would not survive. Our living depends on our ability to conceptualize alternatives, often improvised. Theorizing about this experience aesthetically, critically, is an agenda for radical cultural practice. For me, the space of radical openness is a margin, a profound edge. Locating oneself there is difficult yet necessary. It is not a safe place. One is always at risk. One needs a community of resistance.
Elly, can we bring you in next? There you go.
My name is Elly Hassama. I'm a professor of music theory and the new dean of the Faculty of Music at the University of Toronto. I arrived last summer after teaching in the music department at Columbia University in New York for 15 years. I'm greatly honored to be part of this gathering of voices in celebration of bell hooks, whose words of clarity and grace made a huge impression on me when I was a PhD student. I assigned her book, Teaching to Transgress, in a graduate seminar titled Feminist Pedagogy, which I taught at Columbia for the Institute for Research on Women, Gender, and Sexuality. The students absolutely loved this book. The passage I'll read is from her essay, Theory as Liberatory Practice in Teaching to Transgress. It is not easy to name our pain, to make it a location for theorizing. Patricia Williams, in her essay on being the object of property, writes that even those of us who are aware are made to feel the pain that all forms of domination, homophobia, class exploitation, racism, sexism, imperialism, and gender. It is not easy to name our pain, to theorize from that location. I am grateful to the many women and men who dare to create theory from the location of pain and struggle, who courageously expose wounds to give us their experience to teach and guide as a means to chart new theoretical journeys. Their work is liberatory. It not only enables us to remember and recover ourselves, it charges and challenges us to renew our commitment to an active, inclusive feminist struggle. We have still to collectively make feminist revolution. I am grateful that we are collectively searching as feminist thinkers and theorists for ways to make this movement happen. Our search leads us back to where it all began, to that movement when an individual woman or child who may have thought she was all alone began a feminist uprising, began to name her practice, indeed began to formulate theory from lived experience. Let us imagine that this woman or child was suffering the pain of sexism and sexist oppression, that she wanted to make the hurt go away. I am grateful that I can be a witness, testifying that we can create a feminist theory, a feminist practice, a revolutionary feminist movement that can speak directly to the pain that is within folks and offer them healing words, healing strategies, healing theory. There is no one among us who has not felt the pain of sexism and sexist oppression, the anguish that male domination can create in daily life, the profound and unrelenting misery and sorrow. Making this theory is the challenge before us. For in its production lies the hope of our liberation. In its production lies the possibility of naming all our pain, of making all our hurt go away. If we create feminist theory, feminist movements that address this pain, we will have no difficulty building a mass-based feminist resistance struggle. There will be no gap between feminist theory and feminist practice.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. I am AJwa Onora, a senior lecturer in the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus in Jamaica. My reading comes from Bell Hooks's Feminism is for Everybody, the chapter Feminist Education for Critical Consciousness. She writes, literature that helps inform masses of people, that helps individuals understand feminist thinking and feminist politics need to be written in a range of styles and formats. We need work that is especially geared towards youth culture. No one produces this work in academic settings without abandoning women's studies programs, which are already at risk at colleges and universities as conservatives seek to undo the changes created by struggles for gender justice. We need feminist studies that is community-based. Imagine a mass-based feminist movement where folks go door to door, passing out literature, taking the time, as do religious groups, to explain to people what feminism is all about. Children's literature is one of the most critical sites for feminist education, for critical consciousness, precisely because beliefs and identities are still being formed. And more often than not, narrow-minded thinking about gender continues to be the norm on the playground. Public education for children has to be a place where feminist activists continue to do the work of creating an unbiased curriculum. Future feminist movement must necessarily think of feminism or feminist education as significant in the lives of everyone. Despite the economic gains of individual feminist women, many women who have amassed wealth or accepted the contribution of wealthy males who are our allies in the struggle. We have created no schools founded on feminist principles for girls and boys, for women and men. By failing to create a mass-based educational movement to teach everyone about feminism, we allow mainstream patriarchal mass media to remain the primary place where folks learn about feminism, and most of what they learn is negative. Teaching feminism, feminist thought and theory to everyone means that we have to reach beyond the academic setting and even the written word. Masses of folks lack the skills to read about feminist books. Books on tape, songs, radio, and television are all ways to reach the masses. Thank you.
Hey there. My name is Kristen Boss, and I am an assistant professor of Indigenous Science, Technology, and Society in the Historical Studies Department at UTM and the Women and Gender Studies Institute. I'm also Métis, and as an Indigenous feminist, Bell Hooks' work has and continues to be foundational for the way that I live my life and do my research. I'm going to be reading from her essay, Touching the Earth, from Sisters of the Yam, Black Women and Self-Recovery. When we love the earth, we are able to love ourselves more fully. I believe this. The ancestors taught me it was so. As a child, I loved playing in the dirt in that rich Kentucky soil that was a source of life. Before I understood anything about the pain and exploitation of the Southern system of sharecropping, I understood that grown-up Black folks loved the land. I could stand with my grandfather, Daddy Jerry, and look out at the fields of growing vegetables, tomatoes, corn, collards, and know that this was his handiwork. I could see the look of pride on his face as I expressed wonder and awe at the magic of growing things. I knew that my grandmother Baba's backyard would yield beans, sweet potatoes, cabbage, and yellow squash, that she too would walk with pride among the rows and rows of growing vegetables, showing us what the earth will give when tended lovingly. From the moment of their first meeting, Native American and African people shared with one another a respect for the life-giving forces of nature, of the earth. African settlers in Florida taught the Creek Nation runaways, the Seminoles, methods for rice cultivation. Native peoples taught recently arrived Black folks all about the many uses of corn. The hot water cornbread we grew up eating came to our Black Southern diet from the world of the Indian. Sharing the reverence for the earth, Black and Red people helped one another remember that, despite the white man's ways, The land belonged to everyone. Listen to these words attributed to Chief Seattle in 1854. How can you buy or sell the land, the sky, the warmth of the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of this earth is sacred to my people. Every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every clearing and humming insect is holy in the memory and experience of my people. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters, the deer, the horse, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crests, the juices in the meadows, the body heat of a pony and man all belong to the same family. Miigwech.
I think we've got Angelique next. Thank you, Angelique.
Hi, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Angelique Nixon. I'm a lecturer at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm from the Bahamas, and I am going to be reading from Talking Back. And I struggled to select one because I, like everyone else here, so inspired and influenced by bell hooks. And like I believe in the opening comments, I didn't always agree with her either, but you could not help but take her words and work seriously and grapple with them and write about them and engage with her. She was so provocative. So in that spirit, I want to read from Talking Back, Thinking Feminist, Thinking Black, and this is the opening of the chapter titled On Self-Recovery. Often when the radical voice speaks about domination, we are speaking to those who dominate. Their presence changes the direction and shape of our words. Language is also a place of struggle. I was just a girl coming slowly into womanhood when I read Adrienne Rich's words. This is the oppressor's language, yet I need to talk to you. This language that enabled me to finish graduate school, to write a dissertation, to talk at job interviews, carries the scent of oppression. The Australian Aborigines say the smell of the white man is killing us. I remember the smells of my childhood: hot water, cornbread, turnip greens, fried pies. I remember the way we talked to one another, our words thickly accented Black Southern speech. We are rooted in language, wedded, have our being in words. Language is also a place of struggle. The oppressed struggle in language to recover ourselves, to rewrite, to reconcile, to renew. Our words are not without meaning. They are an action, a resistance. Language is also a place of struggle. Dare I speak to oppressed and oppressor in the same voice? Dare I speak to you in a language that will take us away from the boundaries of domination? A language that will not fence you in, bind you, or hold you. Language is also a place of struggle. The oppressed struggle in language to read ourselves, to reunite, to reconcile, to renew. Our words are not without meaning. They are an action, a resistance. Language is also a place of struggle.
Okay, I think I'm up next. I'm Jazz Ralt. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Toronto, at the University of Toronto Scarborough, as well as downtown at the Faculty of Information. I'm going to be reading a passage from Black Looks, from the essay Representations of Whiteness in the Black Imagination. My thinking about representations of whiteness in the Black imagination has been stimulated by classroom discussions about the ways in which the absence of recognition is a strategy that facilitates making a group the other. In these classrooms, there have been heated debates among students when white students respond with disbelief, shock, and rage as they listen to Black students talk about whiteness, when they are compelled to hear observations, stereotypes, etc., that are offered as data gleaned from close scrutiny and study. Usually, white students respond with naive amazement that Black people critically assess white people from a standpoint where whiteness is the privileged signifier. Their amazement that Black people watch white people with a critical, quote, ethnographic gaze is itself an expression of racism. Often their rage erupts because they believe that all ways of looking that highlight difference subvert the liberal belief in a universal subjectivity. We're all just people, that they think will make racism disappear. They have a deep emotional investment in the myth of sameness, even as their actions reflect the primacy of whiteness as a sign informing who they are and how they think. Many of them are shocked that Black people think critically about whiteness because racist thinking perpetuates the fantasy that the other, who is subjugated, who is subhuman, lacks the ability to comprehend, to understand, to see the workings of the powerful. Even though the majority of these students politically consider themselves liberals and anti-racist, they too unwittingly invest in the sense of whiteness as mystery. In white supremacist society, white people can safely imagine that they are invisible to Black people, since the power they have historically asserted, and even now collectively assert over Black people, accorded them the right to control the Black gaze. As fantastic as it may seem, racist white people find it easy to imagine that Black people cannot see them, if within their desire they do not want to be seen by the dark other. One mark of oppression was that Black folk were compelled to assume the mantle of invisibility, to erase all traces of their subjectivity during slavery and the long years of racial apartheid, so that they could be better, less threatening servants. As effective strategy of white supremacist terror, an effective strategy of white supremacist terror and dehumanization during slavery centered around white control of the Black gaze. Black slaves and later manumitted servants could be brutally punished for appearing to observe the whites that they were serving, as only a subject can observe or see. To be fully an object, then, was to lack the capacity to see or recognize reality. These looking relations were reinforced as whites cultivated the practice of denying the subjectivity of Blacks, the better to dehumanize and oppress, of relegating them to the realm of the invisible. Growing up in a Kentucky household where Black servants lived in the same dwelling with the white family who employed them, newspaper heiress Sally Bingham recalls in her autobiography, Passion and Prejudice, quote, "Blacks, I realized, were simply invisible to most white people, except as a pair of hands offering a drink on a silver tray." Reduced to the machinery of bodily physical labor, Black people learned to appear before whites as though they were zombies, cultivating the habit of casting the gaze downward so as not to appear uppity. To look directly was an assertion of subjectivity, equality. Safety resided in the pretense of invisibility. Even though legal racial apartheid no longer is a norm in the US, the habits that uphold and maintain institutionalized white supremacy linger. Since most white people do not have to see Black people constantly appearing on billboards, television, movies, and magazines, etc., and they do not need to be ever on guard nor to observe Black people to be safe, they can live as though Black people are invisible, and they can imagine that they are also invisible to Blacks. Some white people may even imagine that there is no representation of whiteness in the Black imagination, especially one that is based on concrete observation or mythic conjecture. They think they're seen as by Black folks as only they want to appear. Ideologically, the rhetoric of white supremacy supplies a fantasy of whiteness described in Richard Dyer's essay. This fantasy makes whiteness synonymous with goodness. I'm going to stop right there.
Hi, everyone. Again, I am representing Tanya Haynes. She is a lecturer at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, sister institute on the Cave Hill campus in Barbados. And she asked me to read a selection from Feminist Theory, Margin to Center, as it was one of the first books that Tanya purchased that guided her into feminism. And so I'm going to read a section where Bell Hooks is defining and talking about what feminism means. Many feminist radicals now know that neither a feminism that focuses on woman as an autonomous human being worthy of personal freedom, nor one that focuses on the attainment of equality of opportunity with men can rid society of sexism and male domination. Feminism is a struggle to end sexist oppression. Therefore, it is necessarily a struggle to eradicate the ideology of domination that permeates Western culture on various levels, as well as a commitment to reorganizing society so that the self-development of people can take precedence over imperialism, economic expansion, and material desires. Defined in this way, it is unlikely that women would join a feminist movement simply because we're biologically the same. A commitment to feminism so defined would demand that each individual participant acquire a critical political consciousness based on ideas and beliefs. Over time, the slogan, "The personal is political," which was first used to stress that women's everyday reality is informed and shaped by politics and is necessarily political, became a means of encouraging women to think about that experience of discrimination, exploitation, or oppression automatically corresponded with an understanding of the ideological and institutional apparatus shaping one's social status. As a consequence, many women who had not fully examined their situation never developed a sophisticated understanding of their political reality and its relationship to that of women as a collective group. They were encouraged to focus on giving voice to personal experience. Like revolutionaries working to change the lot of colonized people globally, it is necessary for feminist activists to stress the ability to see and describe one's own reality as a significant step in the long process of self-recovery, but it is only a beginning. When women internalize the idea that describing their own woe is synonymous with developing a critical political consciousness, the progress of feminist movement was stalled. Starting from such incomplete perspectives, it is not surprising that theories and strategies were developed that were collectively inadequate and misguided. To correct this inadequacy in past analysis, we must now encourage women to develop a keen, comprehensive understanding of women's political reality. Broader perspectives can only emerge as we examine both the personal, that is political, the politics of society as a whole, and global revolutionary politics.
Hi, everyone. I'm TL Cowan, and I am an assistant professor of media studies in the Department of Arts, Culture, and Media at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, and also the Faculty of Information. And I'm going to be reading a passage from Feminism, A Transformational Politic, which was first published in From Talking Back, Thinking Feminist, Talking Black in 1989. And I chose this passage because when I was an undergraduate student in the early 90s at Carleton University in Ottawa, Bell Hooks was my first feminist rock concert. And I didn't know that that there could be rooms full of feminists, or that a feminist could be so revered as a rock star, and so I was just in awe at the time. But the other thing about that feminist rock concert was that being in that room of all of those feminists, I became 100% certain that I was queer. So it was really it was a great day. So this is a passage from a text that was something that I was reading at the time. Okay. Small groups of people coming together to engage in feminist discussion, in dialectical struggle, make a space where the personal is political as a starting point for education, for critical consciousness, can be extended to include politicization of the self, that focuses on creating understanding of the ways sex, race, and class together determine our individual lot and our collective experience. It would further feminist movement if many well-known feminist thinkers would participate in small groups, critically re-examining ways their works might be changed by incorporating broader perspectives. All efforts at self-transformation challenge us to engage in ongoing critical self-examination and reflection about feminist practice, about how we live in the world. This individual commitment, when coupled with engagement in collective discussion, provides the space for critical feedback, which strengthens our efforts to change and make ourselves new. It is in this commitment to feminist principles in our words and deeds that the hope of feminist revolution lies. Working collectively to confront difference, to expand our awareness of sex, race, and class as interlocking systems of domination, of the ways we reinforce and perpetuate these structures, is the context in which we learn the true meaning of solidarity. It is this work that must be the foundation of feminist movement. Without it, we cannot effectively resist patriarchal domination. Without it, we remain estranged and alienated from one another. Fear of painful confrontation often leads women and men active in feminist movement to avoid rigorous critical encounter. Yet, if we cannot engage dialectically in committed, rigorous, humanizing manner, we cannot hope to change the world. True politicization, coming to critical consciousness, is a difficult, trying process, one that demands that we give up set ways of thinking and being, that we shift our paradigms, that we open ourselves to the unknown, the unfamiliar. Undergoing this process, we learn what it means to struggle. And in this effort, we experience the dignity and integrity of being that comes with revolutionary change. If we do not change our consciousness, we cannot change our actions or demand change from others. I think I will stop there. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sonja Allen, and I am an assistant professor in computer science at the University of Toronto in Mississauga. And I, like many of you, also encountered bell hooks in women's studies classrooms first in the 90s, and it's been kind of a real delight to revisit her words and reaffirm their relevance to all classrooms, even in computer science as well. So I'm going to read from Teaching to Transgress, and I'll start here. The first paradigm that shaped my pedagogy was the idea that the classroom should be an exciting place, never boring. And if boredom should prevail, then pedagogical strategies were needed that would intervene, alter, even disrupt the atmosphere. Neither Paulo Freire's work nor feminist pedagogy examined the notion of pleasure in the classroom. The idea that learning should be exciting, sometimes even fun, was the subject of critical discussion by educators writing about pedagogical practices in grade schools and sometimes even high schools. But there seemed to be no interest among either traditional or radical educators in discussing the role of excitement in higher education. Excitement in higher education was viewed as potentially disruptive of the atmosphere of seriousness assumed to be essential to the learning process. To enter classroom settings in colleges and universities with the will to share, the desire to encourage excitement was to transgress. Not only did it require movement beyond accepted boundaries, but excitement could not be generated without a full recognition of the fact that there could never be an absolute set agenda governing teaching practices. Agendas had to be flexible, had to allow for spontaneous shifts in direction. Students had to be seen in their particularity as individuals. I drew on the strategies my grade school teachers used to get to know us and interacted with according to their needs. Critical reflection on my experience as a student in unexciting classrooms enabled me not only to imagine that the classroom could be exciting, but that this excitement could coexist with and even stimulate serious and/or intellectual engagement. But excitement about ideas wasn't sufficient to create an exciting learning process. As a classroom community, our capacity to generate excitement is deeply affected by our interest in one another, in hearing one another's voices, in recognizing one another's presence. Since the vast majority of students learn through conservative traditional education practices and concern themselves only with the presence of the professor, any radical pedagogy must insist that everyone's presence is acknowledged. That insistence can't simply be stated, it has to be demonstrated through pedagogical practice. To begin, the professor must genuinely value everyone's presence. There must be an ongoing recognition that everyone influences the classroom dynamic, that everyone contributes. These contributions are resources. Used constructively, they enhance the capacity of any class to create an open learning community. Often before this process begins, there has to be some deconstruction of the traditional notion that only the professor is responsible for classroom dynamics. That responsibility is relative to status. Indeed, the professor will always be more responsible because the larger institutional structures will always ensure that accountability for what happens in the classroom rests with the teacher. It's rare that any professor, no matter how eloquent a lecturer, can generate through his or her actions enough excitement to create an exciting classroom. Excitement is generated through collective effort. Seeing the classroom always as a communal place enhances the likelihood of collective effort in creating and sustaining a learning community. And I'll end there.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kara Lynch, and I'm a student of Gloria Watkins, Bell Hooks. Very honored to have been in that classroom at CUNY along with Beth Coleman. And I also was introduced to her and her work through art circles. So I'm a time-based artist, and I'm also emeritus faculty from Hampshire College. I think she would be very impressed and proud of us all, like everybody with all your credentials and all these beautiful passages. I will say before I start, I really miss her voice. So I love hearing her words, and I keep hearing her voice echoing. So that's something that I'm missing at the moment. So I'm going to read from An Aesthetics of Blackness, Strange and Oppositional. And it was first published in Art Papers in 1990. And then I think it appears in Yearning. And this is a text that I return to when I am working with young people thinking about art and aesthetics. And it's still the only piece I feel that speaks to so many of us. So here goes. This is a story of a house. It has been lived in by many people. Our grandmother, Baba, made this house living space. She was certain that the way we lived was shaped by objects, the way we looked at them, the way they were placed around us. She was certain that we were shaped by space. From her, I learned about aesthetics. The yearning for beauty that she tells me is the predicament of heart that makes our passion real. A quilt maker, she teaches me about color. Her house is a place where I am learning to look at things, where I am learning how to belong in space. In rooms full of objects crowded with things, I am learning to recognize myself. She hands me a mirror, showing me how to look. The color of wine she has made in my cup, the beauty of the everyday. Surrounded by fields of tobacco, the leaves braided like hair, dried and hung, circles and circles of smoke fill the air. We string red peppers fiery hot with thread that will not be seen. They will hang in front of a lace curtain to catch the sun. Look, she tells me, what the light does to color. Do you believe that space can give life or take it away? That space has power? These are the questions she asks, which frighten me. Baba dies an old woman out of place. Her funeral is also a place to see things, to recognize myself. How can I be sad in the face of death, surrounded by so much beauty? Death, hidden in the field of tulips, wearing my face and calling my name. Baba can make them grow. Red, yellow, they surround her body like lovers in a swoon, tulips everywhere. Here a soul on fire, with beauty burns and passes, a soul touched by flame. We see her leave. She has caught me. We must learn to see. Years ago at an art gallery in San Francisco near the Tassajara restaurant, I saw rooms arranged by Buddhist monk Chögyam Trungpa. At a moment in my life when I had forgotten how to see, he reminds me to look. He arranges spaces, moved by an aesthetic shaped by old beliefs. Objects are not without spirit. As living things, they touch us in unimagined ways. On this path, one learns that an entire room is a space to be created, a space that can reflect beauty, peace, and a harmony of being, a spiritual aesthetic. Each space is a sanctuary. I remember, she has taught me, we must learn to see. And I'm going to be a little rebellious because she would want that. And I'm going to read the very first two paragraphs from, I guess, the latest book, which is Appalachian Elegy. So this is new to me, whereas that essay is very familiar. So it's the introduction on reflection and lamentation. And I put this out there because I think Alexis Pauline Gumbs will follow me. Sublime silence surrounds me. I walked to the top of the hill, plopped myself down to watch the world around me. I have no fear here in this world of trees, weeds, and growing things. This is the world I was born into, a world of wild things. In it, the wilderness in me speaks. I am wild. I hear my elders caution Mama, telling her that she is making a mistake, letting me run wild, letting me run with my brother as though no gender separates us. We are making our childhood together in the Kentucky hills, experiencing the freedom that comes from living away from civilization. Even as a child, I knew that to be raised in the country, to come from the backwoods, left one without meaning or presence. Growing up, we did not use terms like hillbilly. Country folk lived on isolated farms away from the city. Backwoods folks lived in remote areas in the hills and hollers. To be from the backwoods was to be part of the wild. Where we lived, Black folks were as much a part of the wild, living in a natural way on the earth as white folks. All backwoods folks were poor by material standards. They knew how to make do. They were not wanting to tame the wilderness in themselves or nature. Living in the Kentucky hills was where I first learned the importance of being wild. Thank you very much.
My name is Alexis Pauline Gumbs. I'm so grateful to be here. I love coming right after those words. I will be reading from Black Looks, and my reading of this is dedicated to Sokari Ekene. That's how I come to this book. Sokari Ekene, the great Nigerian British photographer and foundational part of the Black British lesbian feminist movement. And my favorite part is the dedication. I dedicate this book to all of us who love Blackness, who dare to create in our daily lives spaces of reconciliation and forgiveness, where we let go of past hurt, fear, shame, and hold each other close. It is only in the act and practice of loving Blackness that we are able to reach out and embrace the world without destructive bitterness and ongoing collective rage. Holding each other close, across differences, beyond conflict, through change, is an act of resistance. I am especially grateful to those who hold me close and do not let me go. To those of you who challenge me to live theory in a place beyond words. To you, Angela, Anthony, Anu, Gwenda, Julie, Karen, Paul, Susan, Valeria, and those unnamed whom my heart remembers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Campbell. I will be reading a section from an article called Choosing the Margin as a Space of Radical Openness. It's from the Journal of Cinema and Media from way back in 1989. Those of us who live, who make it, passionately hold on to aspects of that down-home life we do not intend to lose, while simultaneously seeking new knowledge and experience, inventing spaces of radical openness. Without such spaces, we would not survive. Our living depends on our ability to conceptualize alternatives, often improvised. Theorizing this experience aesthetically, critically, is an agenda for radical cultural practice. For me, this space of radical openness is a margin, a profound edge. Locating oneself there is difficult, yet necessary. It is not a safe space. One is always at risk. One needs a community of resistance. 4 years ago, in the preface to Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, I expressed these thoughts on marginality. Quote, "To be in the margin is to be part of the whole, but outside the main body." As Black Americans living in a small Kentucky town, the railroad tracks were a daily reminder of our marginality. Across those tracks were paved streets, stores we could not enter, restaurants we could not eat in, and people we could not look directly in the face. Across those tracks was a world we could work in as maids, as janitors, as prostitutes, as long as it was in a service capacity. We could not enter that world, but we could not live there. We had always to return to the margin, to cross the track, to shacks and abandoned houses on the edge of town. There were laws to ensure our return. To not return was to risk being punished. Living as we did on the edge, we developed a particular way of seeing reality. We looked both from outside in and from inside out. We focused our attention on the center as well as on the margin. We understood both. This mode of seeing reminded us of the existence of a whole universe, a main body made up of both margin and center. Our survival depended on an ongoing public awareness of the separation between margin and center, and an ongoing private acknowledgement that we were a necessary, vital part of the whole. This sense of wholeness, impressed upon our consciousness by the structure of our daily lives, provided us with an oppositional worldview, a mode of seeing unknown to most of our oppressors that sustained us, aided us in our struggle to transcend poverty and despair, strengthening our sense of self and our solidarity. Though incomplete, I was working in these statements, end of quote, sorry. Though incomplete, I was working in these statements to identify marginality as much more than a site of deprivation. In fact, I was saying just the opposite, that it is also the site of radical possibility, a space of resistance. It was this marginality that I was naming as a central location for the production of a counter-hegemonic discourse that is not just found in words, but in habits of being and the way one lives. As such, I was not speaking of a marginality one wishes to lose, to give up, or surrender as part of moving into the center, but rather as a site one stays in, clings to, even because it nourishes one's capacity to resist. It offers to one the possibility of radical perspective from which to see and create, to imagine alternative new worlds. This is not a mythic notion of marginality. It comes from lived experience. Yet I want to talk about what it means to struggle to maintain that marginality, even as one works, produces, lives, if you will, at the center. I no longer live in that segregated world across the tracks. Central to life in that world was the ongoing awareness of the necessity of opposition. When Bob Marley sings, "We refuse to be who you want us to be. We are what we are, and that's the way it's going to be." That space of refusal, where one can say no to the colonizer, no to the downpresser, is located in the margins. And one can only say no, speak the violence of resistance, because there exists a counter language. While it may resemble in ways the colonizer's tongue, it has undergone a transformation. It has been irrevocably changed. When I left that concrete space in the margins, I kept alive in my heart ways of knowing reality which affirm continually not only the primacy of resistance, but the necessity of a resistance that is sustained by remembrance of the past, which includes recollections of broken tongues, giving us ways to speak that decolonize our minds, our very beings. Thank you.
So we're going to pull Lance in, Lance McCready. Thanks.
Apologies, my video camera was off. So good to see everyone and to spend this time reflecting and listening to the words of Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks was sort of very important to me and very much a part of my own consciousness raising about Black masculinity, gender relations, and patriarchy. Bell Hooks was discussed and debated in the social support groups for Black gay men that I was involved with in New York City, like Gay Men of African Descent in New York and Second Sunday in Atlanta, and Black Gay Letters and Arts Movement in sort of California. So I want to read a passage from We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity. Has some controversial statements in it, but what I always loved about Bell Hooks was her willingness to engage in dialogue with us, to be sort of a public intellectual, and to foster sort of conversation about gender and patriarchy amongst Black women and men. She writes, "Few Black men can look at the data about Black male lives and not see clearly the dangers they face and the extent to which these dangers are in place because of their blind allegiance to dominator culture. Black male on male homicide would not exist if it were not encouraged and reinforced by notions of patriarchal manhood and white supremacy. For if it were just about manhood shootouts, Black males wouldn't be killing white men at the same rates that they kill one another. They buy into the racist, sexist assumption that Black male is valueless, and therefore when you take a Black man's life, you are just taking nothing from nothing. This is as nihilism lived." In the essay, It's Raining Men, Robert Reed Farr describes Black men as the most unfree American citizen, stating these facts as 1/3 of the Black males in this country languish in prisons or under the stewardship of assorted probation and parole boards, as Black men continue to be overrepresented in the drug trade and among the legions of persons with chronic illnesses, HIV, cancer, heart disease, alcoholism. As we give our lives over to the violence or to certain silent despair, we have become the emblem of ugliness, bestiality, and barbarism. The imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal society we are living in is to blame for much of the horrors Black men face. However, Black males are responsible for the manner in which they confront those horrors or fail to do so. Black males then must be held accountable when they betray themselves, when they choose self-destructive paths. Most Black men are clinging to outmoded survival strategies, of which patriarchal thinking is one, because they fear if they give up what little power that they may have in the existing system, they will have nothing. This is the irrational fear, but it has such a chokehold on the Black male psyche because of the soul murder that takes place in childhood. It is that soul murder that Richard Wright describes when he writes, "They don't let you feel what you want to feel." In John Bradshaw's book, Bradshaw on the Family, he states, "Soul murder is the basic problem in the world today. It is the crisis in the family. We programmatically deny children their feelings. Once a person loses contact with his own feelings, he loses contact with his own body. To have one's feelings, body, desires, and thoughts controlled is to lose oneself. To lose oneself is to have one's soul murdered." Unlike Black females who are given permission by sexist thinking to be emotional and therefore able to remain in touch with our feelings in childhood, even when we are absurd or taught to mask them to appear strong, Black males are required by rituals of patriarchal manhood to surrender their capacity to feel. The soul murdered Black boy then has a much harder time recovering himself than the damaged girl has. Tragically, the patriarchal thinking that Black man embraces is precisely the logic that will keep him mentally enslaved and mentally ill. Enlightened Black men know this. This is why the mission statement of the group Black Men for the Eradication of Racism clearly states, "We've accepted a definition of ourselves that's killing us in a way no bullet ever could." While most Black women do not identify with anti-patriarchal thinking or support feminism, they, like other groups of women, benefit from the feminist focus on healing. The feminist movement successfully put in place a politics of self-recovery and self-help that directly addresses female pain and offers strategies for transformation. A significant body of work by progressive Black women has emerged which prioritizes healing. In a postscript to the essay, A Phenomenology of the Black Body, Black writer Charles Johnson offers the valuable insight that in an amazing revolutionary feat of cultural reconstruction, contemporary Black women have made dominant the profile of the Black female body as first and foremost spiritual. Collectively, Black males have yet to intervene on the negative cultural representations of the Black male body because they simply cannot change how they are seen as brutes, beasts, bastards, without challenging patriarchal notions of manhood, as well as white supremacist notions of Black male identity. Black males can emerge, engage, and learn from healthy, self-loving Black women strategies of self-recovery. Thank you.
Lance, thank you. Ronaldo is going to read next.
Hello, good evening. Thank you to the organizers for putting together this event. I feel like I've been reading, teaching, thinking with bell hooks, being influenced by her for almost 3 decades, from my early 20s. So that somehow dates me. But I guess the thing that stays with me in remembering and thinking about the late bell hooks today is when my friend, Patty Lee, the filmmaker, arranged for Belle and I to spend a long afternoon having serious conversations about Black masculinity. And those conversations led to Patty making a film for CBC on masculinity that she somehow inducted me into being the host for. I'm going to read from an essay in the collection, from the collection Art on My Mind, Visual Politics, and from the essay Representing the Black Male Body, a couple of paragraphs. In resistance to this construction, Black males cultivated and embraced the hypermasculine image. Richard Moore's contemporary analysis of white gay male fascination with projecting this same image can be easily applied to Black male, straight or gay, who feel the need to counter theories of emasculation and mutilation by projecting the hypermasculine physique. In Gay Eye Days, Moore reminds us that, quote, under the burden of inherited sexual typographies, liberation is found in a working through of past oppression, a working through in which the constituents of oppression become morally diffused by being incorporated into and transformed into the self-creation of an oppressed minority's development of a positive ideology of and for itself, end quote. Historically, visual representations of the hypermasculine Black male were seen mostly in the photographs of sports figures. Two individuals who personified the use of the hypermasculine image as a means of resisting racism are Jack Johnson and Joe Louis. Fiercely handsome, these two Black males symbolize for Black people of their generation, and Black men in particular, via their rebellious masculinity, an assertion of militant resistance to racial apartheid. The contemporary African-American painter, Emma Amos, works with the image of Joe Louis to chart a cultural genealogy of Black resistance in a 5-part piece titled, A Reading at Bessie Smith's Grave. In this huge painted plate, Joe Louis stands between Zora Neale Hurston and Miles Amos, the artist's father. Louis is one of the mighty forces uplifting the race. Amos uses the full frontal solitary image of Louis in a silk colorgraph piece titled Joe Louis, which is painted with one color, a dark shade of brown. Dressed in boxing shorts, wearing his robe, hat on his head, hands in pocket, Louis is the ultimate image of Black male cool. His cool pose conveys the feeling that resistance comes natural to him. For Black males of his generation, Joe Louis was the embodiment of colonized Black masculinity, asserting radical subjectivity. Though sexualized and eroticized by women and men of all ages, of all races, Joe Louis and the many Black sports figures who followed in their wake made their bodies political symbols. That legacy extended into the 60s, when Black male athletes in all sports defiantly opposed white supremacy. Conservative change in this political visual representation of the Black male body began to occur in the late 1970s, with the commodification of Blackness, particularly the use of the Black male body, mainly that of sports figures in television commercials to sell products. When that use of the Black male body converged with an overall change in cultural ways of seeing maleness that condone, quote, the feminization of male bodies to sell products, the images that appeared were no longer directly challenging or subversive. Ironically, this cultural change was generated in part by feminist critique, the men's movement, and gay liberation. Appropriated by market forces, the subversive potential of the displayed male body was countered. This is especially the case for Black males whose radical political agency is often diffused by a process of commodification that strips their bodies of dignity. Although the bodies of Johnson and Louis were commodified, the process was one that exploited and sensationalized political issues such as racial separation, economic inequality. Rather than opposing those forms of commodification that reinvent the Black male body in ways that subordinate and subjugate, today's Black male athletes submit to an objectified use of his person that brings huge monetary reward. Black male capitulation to a neoliberal white supremacist patriarchal commodification signals the loss of political agency, the absence of radical politics. Thank you.
Ronaldo, are you going to read? Oh, that was the last passage. Okay, thank you, everyone. What if we did this every year? What if we took bell hooks is passing as an invitation to keep gathering. And it can be bell hooks, it could be a different kind of constellation, but everyone walks out of this room with a different feeling, with a different spirit. And thank you for that. I also want to say hi to my mom, Faye Coleman. I didn't know you would be here. Hi, Mom. And if it's okay with folks, I'm going to read a, I see Ronald Charles would like an opportunity to read. So let's have one last passage, and then I've got a passage to close us out. Chantal, can you bring Ronald Charles up?
Hello. Okay. My name is Ronald Charles, and I am an associate professor here in the Department for the Study of Religion. I'd like to read from Belonging, a Culture of Place. My return to my native place led me to Berea, a small town in eastern Kentucky with a progressive history and legacy. Berea College was founded in 1858 by a visionary abolitionist who believed in freedom for everyone, women and men. It was named after a biblical town in the New Testament where people received the word with all readiness of mind. Fee founded Berea College with the express purpose of educating men and women, Black and white, from the Appalachian regions of Kentucky, especially poor folk. He wanted them to be able to learn in an environment embodying the principles of freedom, justice, and equality. He was committed to the creation of a lasting culture of belonging. It is fitting that I choose to create home in this place, to be part of a community working to sustain a culture of belong. Berea offers much that was wondrous in my life as a child. The world of my childhood was a world of contrasts. On one hand, a lush green landscape of fast horses, natural waterfalls, tobacco crops, and red birds. And on the other hand, a world of greedy exploitation of big homes and little shacks, a world of fear and domination, of men over nature, of white over black, of top and bottom. In my childhood, I dreamed about a culture of belonging. I still dream that dream. I contemplate what our lives would be like if we knew how to cultivate awareness, to live mindfully, peacefully, if we learned habits of being that would bring us closer together, that would help us build beloved community. In my work, rooted in my native place, Kentucky, and the values I learned as a child, I seek to evoke a language of healing, of hope, of possibility, a language of dreams, a language of belonging. Awakening in the night, when I first moved to my new Kentucky home, I was startled by a familiar sound, the sound of a train, a sound evocative of my childhood. When we moved from Kentucky to city, we lived only a few houses away from the train tracks. Every night, I would lie in the stillness of the dark and listen to trains coming and going, imagining my own life journey, the places I would go, the people I would meet. The sound of the train comforts me now as it did then, for I know I have come home. I have returned to the world of my childhood, the world in which I first sowed the seeds of my being and becoming, a seeker on the path, the contemplative intellectual, choosing solitude, ideas, choosing critical thinking. Here in my native place, I embrace the circularity of the sacred, that where I begin is also where I will end. I belong here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read a short passage from Black Looks from Revolutionary Attitude. Theorizing Black experience is a difficult task. Socialized within white supremacist educational systems and by a racist mass media, many Black people are convinced that our lives are not complex and are therefore unworthy of sophisticated critical analysis and reflection. Even those of us righteously committed to Black liberation struggle who feel we have decolonized our minds often find it hard to speak our experience. The more painful the issues we confront, the greater our inarticulateness. James Baldwin understood this. In The Fire Next Time, he reminded readers that there has been almost no language to describe the horrors of Black life. Without a way to name pain, we are also without the words to articulate our pleasure. Indeed, a fundamental task of Black critical thinkers has been the struggle to break with the hegemonic modes of seeing, thinking, and being that block our capacity to see ourselves oppositionally, to imagine, describe, and invent ourselves in ways that are liberatory. Thank you all for coming. Women and Gender Studies Institute for the collaboration with the Black Research Network. So both of our teams, thank you all for your participation. And we're going to head into a beautiful evening.